Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. As always, please stay with us. Arena Buffalo News is coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or even turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Well, top of the morning to you. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Your readers today are Lori and
JJ.
And let's look at the weather. Without reading it, I can tell you we are caught in a freezer. There's a thick cloud cover, windy and very cold today, with a couple of snow showers. Storm total snowfall of 1 inch or 2, with a high 24. Mostly cloudy tonight with a low of 17. Mostly cloudy and not as cold tomorrow. High of 35. And Thursday, cloudy with a high of a warm 40. If you want to be warm, why don't you go to Corona, California, 93 degrees. And if it's not cold enough for you here, go to Walhalla, North Dakota, minus 16. The sun came up today at 7:24. It sets tonight at 7:24. And there's a new moon tomorrow, March 18th. For the Snow Derby, Buffalo's still winning over Anchorage, Alaska, 87.8 inches to date. They only had 72.8 inches. On to you, JJ.
Well, thank you. The restaurants on the march as March Madness hits. This is from Francesca Bond. March Madness is chaos. The hour between basketball game blocks on Thursday will be particularly chaotic, so it is a good thing that Sofia Garbarini, taproom manager at the arena's neighboring Other Half Brewery, is experiencing chaos. She worked lunch shifts at Red Lobster. I basically am just going to take the lesson from my days at Red Lobster, Gabarini said. You would do a 30-minute lunch, and then you'd be cognizant that most people around you are on a tight schedule for lunch. Trying to keep everything under a half an hour is my goal. On Thursday evening, up to 19,000 fans will be shuffling out of KeyBank Center in search of food. That is predictable. The chaos deepens Sunday night when the NCAA released its game schedule. Unlike previous years, fans will only have 1 hour between game blocks. The first block of 2 basketball games will begin at 1:30 p.m. and end around 6:05 p.m. Most fans must leave the arena, although some small groups of VIPs and suite holders are allowed to stay. Then the fans may return for the second block of games, which starts at 7:10 p.m. and ends around 11:45 p.m. Okay, we're on page 5. I think I'm on the wrong page.
The shorter time window doesn't bother KeyBank Center, where the operations team is well equipped to accomplish everything needed in between sessions.
Says Nicole Kendricks, Vice President of Communications for the Buffalo Sabres and KeyBank Center, but most fans will only have about 1 hour and 5 minutes to get some fresh March in Buffalo air. The forecast predicts a rainy 42-degree day and food. Very different from today. Mm-hmm. Nearly every bar and restaurant downtown hopes to catch those thousands of fans in that brief window. They're luring them in all-you-can-eat buffets, free shuttles, and promises of cooked at the speed of light wings. The problem is that 1 hour and 5 minutes is not a lot of time. It's a lot less time than fans normally have in between games. Last time Buffalo hosted March Madness in 2022, the window between game blocks was about an hour and a half. In reality, you're going to have about 5 or 10 minutes to walk to whatever restaurant is nearby, so it's really basically in and out in 50 minutes, Gabarina said. Restaurants close to the arena are brainstorming tricks and shortcuts for feeding the anticipated tsunami of customers. Gabarini's crew at Other Half, which is walkable in around 5 to 10 minutes from the arena, is partially baking wings in advance. She plans to have the amount of time it normally takes to cook wings. She is also doubling the brewery's typical number of staff. It's going to be a little different than downtown that we see a lot of the time, Gabarini said. It'll be good energy. Connor Hawkins, owner of Banshee Irish Pub on Chippewa Street, is disappointed by the tight time frame, which gives customers less time to travel to his restaurant between games. The bar and restaurants on Chippewa Street, which is a couple of miles from the arena, reserved a shuttle to transport basketball fans between their business and the arena on Thursday. We're kind of hoping for a very strong Thursday, Hawkins says. Now I think it's only giving people about an hour to get in between games, which is a bit disappointing. Hopefully, we still get people up there, but it doesn't give them much time to get a bite to eat and back to the arena for the second session. Not all fans will attend both game blocks, so Hawkins may catch fans before and after the games. He is offering a limited menu to streamline restaurant operations and feed customers more quickly. There is also the rest of the week. Jay Mano, owner of Soho and Frankie's Primo Plus 39 on Chippewa, told the Buffalo News last week that he anticipates a lucrative week from increased hotel traffic and tourists looking for spots to eat, drink, and watch more basketball on TV. We were hoping for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. That'd be great. That's not much we can do about it. We just make do, Hawkins said. It should still be a good weekend. Meanwhile, food trucks will park at Canalside hoping to feed the same large group of fans. Jonathan Rowan, co-owner of the Cheery Chick food truck, should benefit from Canalside's walkable proximity to the arena. Everything about it is cool. It's cool to be on radar, Rowan said. It's just cool to be part of it and recognized as a business, but it's also as a community and have Buffalo in a better spotlight athletically. Like March Madness gameplay, its impact on food trucks may be just as unpredictable. Cold and wet weather could hurt Rowan's bottom line. Fans may not want to stand outside in cool rain for grilled cheese. It's difficult to achieve the perfect balance of selling out, but not selling out too quickly. We could make 10,000, we could lose 4,000, Rowan said. Some teams could have a complete shutout, or the underdog could win. It's what makes March Madness March Madness is, yeah, anything can happen. You just don't know. That's also the life of a food truck owner.
And Hochul says state climate goals need a longer runway. Governor Kathy Hochul says the state needs more time to achieve the goals spelled out in its climate law and is calling on state lawmakers to work with her to make changes. I think we need a longer runway, Hochul said Monday during an appearance in the town of Tonawanda. The Hochul administration is under pressure from a ruling last fall by a state Supreme Court judge who essentially told the state it has to stick to the timetable spelled out in the climate law. The law set a target is to reduce climate changing emissions by 40% and to get 2/3 of the state's electricity from renewable energy sources by the year 2030. It set a goal of getting all of the state's energy from renewable sources by 2040. The judge ordered the State Department of Environmental Conservation to issue new regulations to ensure that the state meet its greenhouse gas reduction goals by 2030. But amid rising energy prices and the state's push for increased electrification, Hochul's administration has embraced an all-of-the-above approach to energy, which keeps natural gas in the mix. She has warned of big cost increases for consumers and businesses if the climate goals stay in place. Environmental groups have pushed back, arguing that the state needs to stay the course in phasing out use of natural gas for the sake of combating climate change. But the climate law, which was pushed by the Cuomo administration, sets a timetable for meeting those goals and doesn't give Hochul wiggle room to change it without legislation that amends the schedule. Hochul called for a realistic path that increases reliance on renewable sources of energy, but without driving up costs for consumer. A judge is telling us that we have to comply with this law, even though we're not ready for it, Hochul said. If we do that, I can tell you as sure as I'm standing here, our costs will go up dramatically. According to an analysis by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, if no changes are made to the law, an upstate New York family that relies on natural gas and oil to heat their homes could see their utilities bills increase by about $4,000 by 2031. By that same year, the cost of a gallon of gasoline could rise by an additional $2.39. I believe that the goals of this law, to build a clean energy future and strengthen our energy system for years to come, is a noble one, Hochul said. I'm committed to it, but I also have to take a responsibility to protect people from rising costs. That's why I'm calling on the state legislature to work with people the next few weeks before the budget is due to come up with a common sense plan that understands the realities of what we're dealing with today, she said. Ask what changes she would like to see made to the 2019 law. Hochul said, we'll be announcing those this week. Electrify New York, a statewide coalition, said this month that Hochul is inexplicably proposing to undermine the state climate law by using deliberately exaggerated cost estimates. We urge the legislature to reject these bad faith arguments from corporate interests and build on our proven success, Electrify New York said. Investments in clean energy and climate action are investments in affordability and a safer, healthier, and just future for our communities. The Buffalo Niagara Partnership, the region's largest business group, has called for delaying the state's climate law by 10 years. Hochul took aim at the Trump administration for eliminating subsidies that promote development of additional wind and solar power and battery storage. The federal government in Washington is overtly hostile to all of our efforts to have clean, renewable energy, she said. Earlier this year, the state paused implementation of the All-Electric Buildings Act. The law would have required newly built homes, with some exceptions, to use electricity for heating and to power appliances. At the time of that announcement, Liz Moran, New York policy advocate with Earth Justice, called the decision a betrayal of the governor's own commitments to address energy affordability and to reduce climate pollution for New Yorkers. Hochul is also pushing for additional nuclear generating capacity at a facility in upstate New York to meet a demand for electricity that is forecast to grow by 50 to 90% over the next 2 decades. But it also will take years for that additional power to become available. The governor on Monday rallied against high gasoline prices, blaming the Trump administration for driving up the cost at the pump by launching the war against Iran. In the Buffalo-Niagara region, the average price on Monday was $3.56 per gallon, up 5% from a week ago and 16% from a month ago. The state average on Monday was $3.61, and the national average was $3.71.
Thank you. Trump asks for help with Iran war after shunning diplomacy. This is from Seung Min Kim and Will Wishart and Bill Barrow of AP. President Trump relied on his gut and largely sidestepped diplomatic coordination as he made the decision to launch the strikes on Iran with Israel, but now, with the war's economic and geopolitical consequences unfurling rapidly, he's cajoling allies and other global powers to help mop up the mess. Trump said he's asked roughly a half a dozen other countries to send warships to reopen the vital Strait of Hormuz, a consequential waterway through which 1/5 of the world's traded oil flows. So far, none has committed. Trump even indicated he would use his long-planned trip to China to pressure Beijing to help him with a new coalition meant to get oil tanker traffic moving through the strait, a notion that later was downplayed by a cabinet member. We strongly encourage other nations whose economies depend on the strait far more than ours. We want them to come and help us with the strait, Trump said at the White House on Monday, listing Japan, China, South Korea, and several countries in Europe as examples. Trump has argued that the shipping channel is not something the United States needs because of its own access to oil. It's the type of bullying the action that has secured key foreign policy wins for the Republican president in his second term, like prompting nearly all NATO countries to put up their defense spending last year after he spent years accusing allies of freeloading of American largesse and using tariffs to extract investments and concessions from trade partners. But with oil prices soaring and the Middle East rattled by violence, there's little inclination for other countries to heed Trump's call. China is non-committal. France is a maybe on escorting ships when circumstances permit. Britain is unlikely to dispatch a warship. And Trump's view of this lack of appetite for helping to secure the strait confirms his suspicions about the benefits of working with other countries, because if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've always felt that there was a weakness of NATO, Trump said Monday. We were going to protect them, but I always said that when in need, they won't protect us. Yet, not long after, Trump insisted the U.S. didn't need help from anyone because we're the strongest nation in the world. Nonetheless, the pressure campaign from the White House is continuing. Trump's top spokeswoman, when asked why other nations were neither consulted nor involved, should put their troops in danger to secure the Strait of Hormuz, argued that other countries were benefiting directly from Trump's attempt to disarm the Iranian regime. This is something not just the United States, but the entire Western world has agreed with for many, many years, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told reporters on Monday. Separately, Trump signaled in a Sunday interview with the Financial Times that we'd like to know before he leaves for a summit later this month in Beijing whether China will help secure the strait because of its reliance on Middle Eastern oil, adding, we may delay. Yet, calling off the face-to-face visit with Chinese President Xi Jinping could have its own major economic consequences as the relations between the world's two biggest economies remains fraught over tariffs and other issues. In a CNBC interview Monday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said any delay would not be due to disputes over the strait or expressly urged investors not to react negatively should Trump put off his trip. If the meeting for some reason is rescheduled, it would be rescheduled because of logistics, Bessent said from Paris, where he was meeting with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng for a new round of trade talks that were meant to pave the way for the trip. A foreign ministry spokesperson in Beijing, Lin Jian, did not respond directly to questions about Trump's call for outside help in the strait. He noted that the impact on goods and energy trade and repeated his government's call for an end to the fighting. In the early days of the Iran conflict, Trump had said U.S. Navy vessels would escort oil tankers through the strait, which connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, and downplayed the threat posed by Iran. But as oil prices soared, he and his administration have been forced to consider new options, including the idea broached this weekend for other countries to join the push with their own warships. Trump told reporters that he has asked about 7 countries to participate in a coalition that would help oil tankers navigate the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran said is only cut off for the United States, Israel, and their allies. In addition to China, Japan, and South Korea, Trump has made appeals for help to Britain and France. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Monday that Britain is working with allies in a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but it will not be drawn into the wider war. Britain is discussing with the U.S. and allies in Europe and the Gulf of the possibilities of using mine-hunting drones that the U.K. has in the region, Starmer said, but he signaled that the U.K. is unlikely to dispatch a warship. Other countries have similarly been resistant to get involved. Australia's Transport Minister Catherine King told Australian Broadcasting Corporation on Monday that we won't be sending a ship to the Strait of Hormuz, although she wasn't aware of such a request from the U.S. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani told reporters in Brussels on Monday that while Italy backs reinforcing EU naval missions from the Red Sea, I don't think these missions can be expanded to include the Strait of Hormuz. War in Iran has sent the price of oil skyrocketing, which has raised the price Americans pay at the pump just as the midterm election season begins to heat up. Bessent downplayed the war's impact on oil prices and accused the media of trying to make it into some crisis that it's not. Echoing Trump, the secretary insisted price would come down after the conflict ends. I don't know how many weeks it may be, but the other side of this, the world would be safer and we'll be better supplied, Bessent said on CNBC. China, which faces its own economic pressures, recently lowered its 2026 target for growth slightly to 4.5% to 5%. Its slowest projected growth since 1991, meaning prolonged disruptions in the strait could have long-term impacts for Beijing as well. At the White House on Monday, Trump was asked what his aides have told him about how long gas prices will remain high. Trump dismissed the question, showing once again that he ultimately relies on his own instincts. I don't need advisors to tell me that, he said. I know what it is.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 19 minutes after the hour. And now we have a comment from Jackie Calms. Recklessness shown by Trump puts the entire country at risk. President Trump was uncommonly lucky in his first term, neither inheriting nor provoking a crisis of the sort that tests U.S. presidents until COVID-19 struck in his final 10 months. He failed that test. Trump 1.0 was bequeathed a growing economy from President Barack Obama, and the incoming president assembled a roster of capable advisors who often acted to prevent him from doing nutty things at home and abroad. Trump 2.0 made sure that no such human guardrails populated his second cabinet, only genuflecting enablers. Unrestrained, he has presided over one crisis on top of another, all of his own making. Tariff mayhem and high prices, armed agents and troops in American cities, repeated violations of court orders, demolition at federal agencies and the White House. And now Trump has taken the nation to war against Iran in league with Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. Depending on the moment and the audience, a contradictory Trump is either claiming the war is very complete or that much remains to be done to decimate Iran. On Wednesday, he blithely told Axios, "Anytime I want it to end, it will end," even as U.S. officials plan further actions. Trump's war of choice and the killing of the supreme leader of Iran's terroristic theocracy now has spawned another potential crisis. Counterterrorism experts warn the risk of retaliatory terrorist threats at home. And that threat, whether from homegrown extremists or sleeper cells of the sort that came alive for 9/11, is likely greater because of the initial self-induced crisis of Trump's second term, his whacking of the federal government. Trump authorized Elon Musk's destruction of the bureaucracy in the name of government efficiency and continues to exact retribution against any federal employee who had anything to do with investigating and prosecuting him during his interregnum. Longtime agents and operatives have been eliminated at the FBI, Justice Department, Department of Homeland Security, CIA, and elsewhere. Especially at the FBI, counterterrorism experts with centuries of collective experience are gone. Consequently, the president who promised to make America safe again has arguably made Americans less safe. I raised this scary prospect just over a year ago as Trump's teardown of the purported deep state was underway. And now a Mideast war that Trump promised never to start has further incentivized Iran and its jihad proxies to hit back, just as he's diminished the nation's early warning systems. Enough intelligence remains, however, that even in the days before Trump ordered the first strikes against Iran, government analysts were picking up worrisome signs of Iranian plotting against U.S. targets, the New York Times reported. After the U.S.-Israel onslaught and the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on February 28th, the government intercepted a possible Iranian operational trigger to sleeper assets outside Iran, and that was according to ABC News. Counterterrorism expert Colin P. Clark, executive director of the Soufan Center, which focuses on global security and transnational terrorism, wrote this past week in The Atlantic that the U.S. agency's record of disrupting Iranian-backed plots in America was in jeopardy, given the recent changes in funding, in personnel, and in priorities. Because of this, he concluded the U.S. homeland is arguably more vulnerable than it has been in a very long time. A week before the U.S. went to war with Iran, the FBI director Kash Patel was off gallivanting in Milan at the Olympics, where he struggled to chug a Michelob Ultra, a firing offense in its own right, when he should have been preparing for the potential of an Iranian response on U.S. soil. Patel's preposterous partying with the U.S. men's hockey team while war planning was underway in Washington was widely, justifiably, mocked. But it stands as a metaphor for the entire Trump administration's cavalier attitude toward homeland security. Its abusive focus on both migrants and citizens protesting on the migrants' behalf is a distraction from the actual threats to this country. Patel, like his boss at the Justice Department, Attorney General Pam Bondi, has made plain that the president's political enemies are the real public enemies number one. One of Bondi's first acts was creation of a weaponization working group to identify, fire, or prosecute those in her department who investigated and prosecuted Trump. many of whom also had experienced in domestic and transnational terrorism. The association representing FBI agents called her purges dangerous distractions from the work to make America safe again. Days after starting the Iran war, Trump fired his Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Her costly cosplaying as the Homeland's heroine on horseback in anti-migrant videos, along with her penchant for luxury jets allegedly to transport deportees, was too much, even for him. Yet all three national security officials, Noem, Bondi, and Patel, simply reflect Trump's own warped approach and blasé attitude toward the home front. When Time magazine recently asked the commander-in-chief whether Americans should be worried about potential terrorist strikes at home, he replied, "I guess. We plan for it," he added, "but yeah, we expect some things. Like I said, some people will die." The administration is planning for it all right. Many senior Trump officials have taken up residence in houses on military bases, including Bondi, Noem, and the Secretaries of State and Defense, Marco Rubio and Peter Hegseth, and White House consigliere Stephen Miller. The rest of us just have to keep our fingers crossed, I guess.
Thank you. From Abby McCloskey, with staggering deficits, it's time to adopt a debt-to-GDP limit. I recently went to the doctor about a minor issue. Is what I'm expecting normal, I asked. No, it's never normal, she said, but it happens to almost everybody. And I thought, that pretty much sums up the problem of national debt. It's been normal for America to run up the national deficit since the 1980s. In fact, it's become normal for almost every developed country to carry burdensome debt. But what's considered normal should not be confused with how a healthy government should work. Debt held by the public is the size of our entire economy, 101% of the gross GDP, and projected to rise to 120% of GDP in 2036, according to the Congressional Budget Office. This is easily surpassed the record of 106% just after World War II. America's deficit is worse than expected just a year ago, to the tune of $100 billion. Just when you consider that as recently as 2001 we were running a surplus, you have to wonder, at what point will Americans question what they've gotten for going so deeply in the red? No one wants to stomach the necessary higher taxes and reduce spending as a cure. This was clear when a proposal from the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles Commission appointed by President Barack Obama failed to get across that line. That plan was included incremental and necessary reforms to entitlements and tax structures that would, over decades, create a glide path back to healthy territory. We didn't take the medicine. Other suggestions have been put forward since, but none hold up to even the slightest scrutiny. For example, there's the grow your way out of it option. Brookings economist Jessica Reidel's calculation shows that it would require 5 to 6% growth for decades, something the American economy has never sustained. The tax the rich and corporations option is no better. Reidel notes that you could tax every small business and millionaire at 100%, and you still wouldn't come close to closing the budget gap, and budgetary problems would grow as job creators fled. Fiscal health won't come from tariffs. Higher tariffs were on track to reduce deficits by an estimated $3 trillion over 10 years, but this wasn't even enough to cover the $4.7 trillion price tag of the One Big Beautiful Act, let alone existing spending. Inflate your way out of it? We could devalue our currency and thus make the debt relatively smaller. But the American people recently had a taste of higher inflation and shunned the politicians responsible for it. Then there's a cut, fraud, waste, and abuse option. Much blame for the debt has been laid out at the base of our bloated federal bureaucracy. While there are savings to be had, the salaries and benefits of the entire federal civilian workforce hover at around 1% of the gross domestic product. DOGE only slightly slowed federal spending, and believe it or not, no one is standing by knowingly watching billions of taxpayer dollars go to the wrong people. Cut the military budget? Defense spending is less than 15% of the federal budget. America's politicians have settled on the worst option. ignore the problem. The U.S. has a unique advantage in that we can run up our bills and people will keep buying our debt. But in their 2023 book, Why Empires Fail, Rome, America, and the Future of the West, Peter Heather and John Rapley remind us the fiscal imbalance is a death knell for empires. As taxes squeeze the next generation to keep providing services and pay off swelling interest payments, economic rewards increasingly go to a smaller group. Basic services like safety, health, and education become unreliable. The whole system becomes more unstable, and it's a doom loop that's hard to escape. Congress should pass a law of the federal debt cannot exceed 100% of gross domestic product. That would enable flexibility for each Congress and White House to adjust to spending and tax levels as priorities change over time. It would stabilize interest payments and the debt limit charades and force politicians to make trade-offs before passing their own pet priorities. Combined with automatic stabilizers, wherein preset spending cuts and tax hikes occur in the wake of congressional impasse, would end costly government shutdowns, and it could be designed so that only a supermajority could override the limit. Just because something has become normal doesn't mean it is.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes after the hour, and the editorial the editorial comic today shows a cute little dog wearing a wonderful little Sabres vest. He has the sports column in his mouth, and his tail is wagging a mile a minute. And the sports column says, "Still atop Atlantic," and the title of the comic, "Sabres Are a Wagon." In my view, Susan Giannotis tells us that the students' Italy trip turned out well. Over February break, I had the privilege of chaperoning a group of students on a week-long trip to Italy. For many, it was a series of firsts: their first plane ride, first time leaving the country, first extended trip without family. One senior proudly shared that she had paid for the trip herself, carefully counting down each monthly payment. Our journey began in Toronto, but a delay caused us to miss our connecting flight and spent 10 hours in a Paris airport. What could have become a stressful ordeal instead turned out to be a bonding experience. The students played group video games, shared snacks, laughed, and made the best of their meal vouchers. There was no complaining, just a sense of adventure and togetherness. In Florence, a few of the boys had researched a local barbershop in advance and treated themselves to haircuts. Later, several students followed our guide's recommendation and shared a traditional Florentine steak. They said that it was so delicious it might ruin all other steaks for them. They also raved about the pizza, but not every meal impressed them. One student insisted his mother's meatballs were far superior to those that we were served. He's got good brownie points there. Most of those students had not been friends before the trip. They were different ages, came from different grades and social circles. They had to share hotel rooms and were instructed to stay in groups of at least 3 or 4. Yet, over the course of the week, they bonded by sharing inside jokes, supporting one another, and laughing together. Watching them navigate free time responsibly and joyfully was simply a pleasure. Venice during Carnival was both exhilarating and stressful. The city was so crowded it was difficult to move at times. Our local guide lacked a visible marker like an umbrella, and a few students briefly fell behind, though no one got lost. The chaos was worth it for the gondola rides and the sight of elaborate carnival costumes filling the streets. Vendors sold masks in every imaginable style and color. When I bought and wore one, the students initially laughed, then promptly purchased their own. We were also able to visit the island of Burano, known for its lace making. The town was very picturesque, with brightly colored houses and winding canals. I was surprised that the Vatican did not impress them as much as I expected. The guide's thick accent made it difficult for some to follow, and similar challenges arose in Rome. A few students were disappointed that we did not tour the inside of the Colosseum, but they decided it simply meant they would have to return someday. Pisa, which I had assumed might be underwhelming, turned out to be a favorite stop. Taking optical illusion photos of everyone holding up the Leaning Tower, that was hilarious. One unexpected takeaway was the difference in bathroom access. Restrooms in Italy often require a purchase or at least a euro fee. It became a practical lesson in cultural differences and planning ahead. I am grateful these students were given this opportunity and that I was able to share in their growth, resilience, and joy. It was more than a trip. It was an experience that expanded their world.
Thank you. This is about anti-Semitism from Nolan Finley. Blame those who made anti-Semitism fashionable. This is what happens when anti-Semitism is institutionalized. Thursday's attack on the Temple Israel Synagogue in West Bloomfield Township, Michigan, reflects more than 2 years of building animosity in this country and worldwide toward Israel and, by extension, the Jewish people. While officials have not formally called this a terror attack or assigned its motivation to anti-Semitism, I'll make that leap. It fits too neatly into an ugly narrative that has been growing in this country since Israel responded to the October 7th, 2023 massacre of its citizens by Hamas. Opposition to Israel's war in Gaza opened the door for the public expressions of anti-Semitism to enter the political mainstream and permeate the culture in ways that would have been disqualifiers just a few years ago. Rather than being universally shouted down, they were tolerated, ignored, and even celebrated on college campuses and social media chat rooms in the halls of Congress. 14 Democratic members of the House refused last year to vote in favor of a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. It is a bipartisan failing. Right-wing podcaster Tucker Carlson has built an audience of more than 3 million followers by blaming Israel for every bad thing that is happening in the world and accusing its leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, of pulling the puppet strings of President Trump. Carlson is a nut who's gained influence over a significant number of decision makers. On the left, progressive Democrats have embraced Gaza as their cause célèbre, perpetuating the libel that the victims of an intended genocide were actually engaged in genocide themselves. That party's leaders can't muster the courage to stand up against such nonsense. New York City, home to America's largest population of Jews, elected as its mayor Zohran Mamdani, a man with a long history of anti-Israel statements. While Mamdani denies he's an anti-Semite, social media postings by his wife, Rama Douaji, has seemingly sympathizing with the October 7th Hamas massacre, have recently come to light. The connection between the anti-Semitic rhetoric and anti-Semitic violence is becoming hard to deny. Thursday's attack against the largest Reform synagogue in America and the school it houses follows 3 incidents of gunfire in 5 days earlier this month against synagogues in Toronto. For those who would treat this as just another in a string of assaults on houses of worship of all faiths, think about this. When a shooter drove a vehicle into a Mormon church in Flint, Michigan last year and set the building afire, no nationwide alerts went out for Mormon facilities nationwide to lock down. But Thursday, synagogues across the U.S. were warned to lock their doors. Haters who have always found a million reasons to hate Jews, and now they've found one more. The joint U.S.-Israel war against Iran has raised new claims that America is doing Netanyahu's bidding. Opponents will say that we have not gone to war against Iran. This failed attempt to murder school children would have never happened. A more realistic view is that it justifies the dismantling of the Iranian regime. The evil that found its way to West Bloomfield on Thursday had its headquarters in Tehran. It won't end until we cut off the head of the beast.
In another voice, Brian Graham says state schools deserved sustainable funding. Public education remains one of the most vital and influential pillars of every community. Schools serve as safe havens where children learn, grow, and develop into young adults ready to contribute meaningfully to society. In the post-pandemic era, public education has been asked to do more than ever before. Schools now take on responsibilities far beyond academics, addressing mental health, socioeconomic challenges, emotional well-being, food insecurity, and other essential supports once considered outside their traditional mission. Schools must ensure safety, expand counseling support, provide interventions, and offer meals beyond the school day to meet community needs. Districts must rely on multi-year financial planning to manage these expanding responsibilities. Against this backdrop, Governor Kathy Hochul's recent executive budget proposal for education funding is deeply concerning. In 2024, a state-funded review of the foundation aid formula was ordered to modernize the metrics and poverty measures in the formula and to evaluate the elimination of the Save Harmless provision that increases aid for wealthier districts each year. In only the second year of using the updated formula, nearly 65% of school districts are now labeled Save Harmless, effectively freezing their foundation aid at last year's levels. The proposed 1% increase for these districts now includes high need and high poverty districts, many in western New York, and fails to keep pace with inflation, mandated cost increases, and growing student needs. While the governor is enthusiastic about expanding universal pre-kindergarten and lowering the eligibility age to 4 to benefit families needing childcare, these new initiatives should not come at the expense of stable foundation aid for current students in their programming and district operations. Without meaningful adjustments to foundation aid, schools will face structural deficits that may soon require emergency and unplanned state funding interventions. New York's public schools need a funding structure aligned with real costs that provides adequate and sustainable foundation aid funding now. Strong schools build strong communities, and maintaining them is an investment that we cannot afford to overlook.
And help from Albany is the editorial for the day. A boost in state aid will help Buffalo get its financial house in order. If Democrats in the state legislature have their way, the city of Buffalo can expect good news in the form of increased state aid. The action was taken in tentative state spending plans that passed the Assembly and Senate on Friday. Buffalo's struggling finances need the state's help, but as News Albany Bureau Chief Robert Gavin noted, whether the proposal become a law will depend on whether they are adopted in the final state budget due April 1st that Governor Kathy Hochul and legislative leaders will negotiate. Still, the Albany Lifeline is taking shape. In a move that elicits consternations from minority Republicans, both the Assembly and Senate resolutions propose new income tax surcharges on New Yorkers who earn $5 million or more in addition to other taxes. Hochul faces re-election this year, which makes her opposition to any increase in personal income taxes politically sensible. However, it hasn't stopped the Buffalo-born governor from helping her hometown, which faces budget deficits in the tens of millions of dollars over the next 2 years. Hochul has proposed increasing aid to the city of Buffalo by $40 million, totaling nearly $206.3 million. The Senate resolution included the governor's increase. The Assembly resolution added $16.8 million on top of the governor's proposed increase. Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan, a former state senator, was sworn in 2 months ago and has been tapping his resources to get control of the cratering budget. He, along with other locally elected leaders, made the traditional pilgrimage to the state capitol and asked his former colleagues to help by passing a law to permit the city's financial control board to borrow up to $500 million on the city's behalf over the next 4 years. It would also help if City Comptroller Barbara Miller Williams conceded over the city's capital budget and the need to borrow for its projects. There's been an ongoing showdown between former Mayor Christopher Scanlon and Miller's Williams over the city's capital budget and the need to borrow for its projects totaling tens of millions of dollars. The debate continues. The News' Justin Sondel recently reported that the state appeals court is weighing whether Buffalo's comptroller can refuse to borrow money approved by the mayor and common councilor for capital projects. As noted, fiscal caution is admirable, but holding up capital budget borrowing also delays important municipal infrastructure projects, including many public school improvements that are almost completely reimbursable. Miller's Williams still has not sufficiently told the public the reason to keep those projects in limbo. For his part, Ryan has been occupied with sorting out the financial issues left by past administrations. As part of that effort, a possible tax increase plus an increase in the unpopular city user fee, which the Ryan administration said is necessary after years of imbalance in the enterprise fund, which collects user fees and pays for services. The city's future stability demands hard choices. Albany's Lifeline could buy Buffalo time, and after that, it's up to local leadership.
In the business of sports, at least 2 workers removed following stadium vandalism. At least 2 workers have been removed from the Buffalo Bills Stadium construction project after the vandalism incident last month that shut down the site for almost a week. The workers responsible for what has been described as vulgar and homophobic graffiti inside the stadium that caused around $150,000 in damages reportedly were out-of-town independent contractors and not part of any local union. Brown said that was according to Paul Brown, president of the Buffalo Trades Council and the Niagara Building Trades Council. He said that they got at least 2 of the workers reportedly responsible for the vandalism, which means there may be some others who could still be identified as being part of the incident and removed from the job. Non-union contractors can bid on the jobs at the stadium, but those companies must use their union members with their staff at a ratio of 1-to-1. For these 2 workers, that did not mean expulsion from the union, since they were not in the union, Brown said. No charges have been brought by the Erie County Sheriff's Office, which is investigating the matter. They weren't local guys, Brown said Monday after a meeting of the Erie County Stadium Corp., the state entity overseeing the construction project. It was an out-of-town contractor, and it was his guys, 2 of them that they caught, that I know of. WGRZ-TV reported that 1 or more workers involved in the vandalism were connected to 34 Group, the commercial construction company run by Bills Hall of Famer Thurman Thomas, but the state would not say with what company the workers removed from the project were affiliated. Rinaldi said all companies doing contracted work on the stadium are still on board, and none have been removed as a result of the vandalism. A spokesman for 34 Group confirmed that 3 independent contractors the company was using were recently reduced from the construction site, but it was part of the normal course of business, in which manpower is ramped up and down during the project. The 34 Group is in its 3rd year of being on site for the stadium project in Orchard Park. In the state's first comment about the incident, Rinaldi said they were extremely disappointed that anyone would go and do that out at this job. I don't want to say too much more because it is still under investigation by the Erie County Sheriff's Office, so I want to be respectful of that. But we're hoping that it gets cleared up and that we do not expect to have that problem again. Until we all know what happened out there, I don't think it's fair to speculate. The vandalism that shut down construction for 4 days was done to luxury suites on the west side of the facility. Crude remarks were sprayed on granite countertops, tile, and flooring over the course of a weekend. The 200-level suites were 90% done, but the porous finishes weren't sealed yet, so there was no way to salvage them. The damage is estimated at $150,000, which would likely need to be absorbed or covered by insurance. Brown has said the vandalism is a black eye for the project that has otherwise brought positive attention to Western New York. The project has shined a light on the work of the trades in the region, as well as bringing many companies to Buffalo. Gilbane Turner issued a $100,000 reward to anyone with information leading to the arrest and conviction of the vandals. Brown said Monday that the graffiti is all cleaned up and the project is still on track to be substantially done this summer. We are moving on. We're on schedule. We will get it done.
Thank you. Shays gets another $5 million from the state for expansion. Now, this is from Jonathan Epstein. As construction crews gear up this week to begin work on an expansion of Shays Buffalo Theater, Governor Kathy Hochul on Monday announced an additional $5 million in funding from the state for the project, raising the state's total commitment to $18.5 million. That represents more than half of the $35 million cost of that project, which will increase the size of the theater building by adding a new lobby and entrance, new concession space, upgraded bathrooms, 3 new high-speed elevators. No changes will be made to the 3,019-seat historic theater itself, which opened in 1926, 100 years ago. Shays is the cornerstone of downtown Buffalo in the theater district and is one of New York's leading arts institution, Hochul said. By investing in this iconic venue, we're investing in the future of Buffalo's cultural and economic vitality by supporting hundreds of jobs, area shops, and restaurants. Shays, led by CEO Brian Higgins, is undertaking a massive expansion in its facility as it marks its 100th anniversary this year. The goal is to make it easier to get patrons into and around the building, providing more room for movement and more amenities to improve the experience. Plans call for construction of a 4-story, 26,500 square foot addition on the rear parking lot of the south side of the building on Pearl Street, creating a dramatic entrance for both pedestrians and vehicles, complete with a new drop-off loop and heated pedestrian paths. Designed by architects at Carmine Wood Design, it will feature a combination of limestone, stainless steel, and glass, and a tiered building with crystal-inspired chandeliers, terrazzo flooring, flexible lounge seating, and a new bar inside.
Wow.
It will include a new box office, expanded lobby, an event space, concessions at each level, 63 additional bathroom fixtures to reduce lines, and other needed accessibility upgrades such as the elevators. It will also include a new outdoor patio, a sensory room for people with special needs to enjoy performances, yes, and expanded space for programming before and after shows as well as during special events. 60 more bathroom fixtures? Hallelujah for all the events, Hochul said. The project has been in the works for more than a year and won approval from the City Planning Board in September, but it was held up for 4 months because of litigation from Frank Chinesi's Legacy Development, which owns the adjacent Theater Palace and wanted to preserve access to its building. Legacy voluntarily dismissed a lawsuit in January after reaching a settlement with Shays, clearing the way for the project. Construction, led by Buffalo Construction Consultants, will take another 20 months, finishing up in time for curtain up in September of 2027. However, shows will continue at Shays during the interim. Over the past year, we've moved from design to construction with a sense of purpose and urgency because you know how important the Shays expansion project is to our patients, Higgins said, as Jeremiah Shay, great-grandnephew of Shays founder Michael Shay, looked down from the audience. A new building will rise alongside this historical theater, opening the doors to the next century and the next generation of patrons at Shays. The state's commitment includes $7.5 million to the New York Power Authority, representing the single largest award under NYPA's Power Proceeds program. It also includes a $5 million capital grant from the New York State Council on the Arts, $5 million from the Dormitory Authority of New York State, and $1 million from Empire State Development Corporation's Regional Council Capital Fund. Hochul announced the first allocation in February of 2025, modeled after European opera houses and originally opened as an elaborate movie house. Shays is one of the only remaining Tiffany-designed theaters in the country. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places, it became a venue for live vaudeville shows, singers, plays, musicals, and other performances. It is the largest theater in the state, eclipsing the biggest on Broadway, Gershwin, by 50% in seats, and its stage was enlarged by 40% in the 1990s. Though all the changes in our city have seen in over 100 years, Shays has stood as a symbol of what Buffalo, at its very best, is. Vibrant, creative, and connected, Higgins said. When Shays is active, all of downtown Buffalo is active. When you invest in the arts, you invest in people, but it has also faced struggles over the decades and really faced demolition 3 times in the 1970s before it was finally saved. Higgins noted the Shays employs 67 full-time equivalent workers but relies on more than 900 volunteers to support its operations. Many other theaters have far more paid staff, but no other theater in the country, he said, has that many volunteers, showing the dedication of community. Shays has been one of the greatest civic treasures in Western New York, Higgins said, but a building this magical, enduring for a century, it doesn't happen by accident. Shays has been a labor of love treasured by the people of this community and this institution. The expansion at Shays Buffalo is the latest initiative at the Shays Performing Arts Campus in the Theater District, which also includes Shays 710 and Shays Smith Theaters. The nonprofit completed at a $5 million transformation at Shays 710 in September, while the city committed $4.6 million to replace the roof systems on Shays Buffalo. Another project is planned for Shays Smith, which is the oldest of the 3 at 110 years old. This is a place we must fight to ensure it is here for many years to come, Hochul said. Our cultures must endure the difficult times. According to Shays, more than 350,000 patrons attend shows each year, including touring Broadway musicals, plays, concerts, family shows, comedy, educational programming, local school presentations, historic tours, specialty events, and a free family movie series. Shays also hosts the 43 North Finals. In the last year, it partnered with Musical Fair Theater, welcoming the Amherst Theater Company's performances to Shays 710. So if you're a producer and you're looking over the venue landscape in New York State, you're coming to Shays, Higgins said. The future of Shays is very, very positive.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555, 716-821-5555. Robert Bobby Bandage, Joanne Serto, Elizabeth C. Kersons, William Smith Flickinger, Joseph M. Krikovich, John G. LaFalce, John Francis Schaller, and Daniel Redman, age 86, a Buffalo police inspector. As an inspector holding the highest civil service rank in Buffalo, he could have just worked a steady day shift with no weekends. He chose to work night shifts, midnights, and weekends, the same hours that would have been assigned to a rookie patrol officer. He wanted to spend time with the officers on the street. Mr. Redman died on March 4th after following an illness of several months. He was, again, 86. Judy Pace, 83, model and actress, was a groundbreaker. Judy Pace, a path-breaking model and star of blaxploitation films who appeared in television shows through the 60s and 70s, the hit made-for-TV movie Brian's Song, died last week at the age of 83. The woman, once described by Variety as the most beautiful black actress in Hollywood, died in her sleep Wednesday while visiting family in Marina del Rey. If you need any further information on these names, please call us at 716-821-5555, 716-821-5555.
Now for a little entertainment now from the Royal Stars, we have Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Tuesday, March 17th of 2026. You're a creative optimist who trusts your instincts. You're inquisitive, but you dislike confrontation. Lucky you. This year, your creativity, zest, and desire for life are at a pinnacle. The stars show the kind of day you'll have: 5 being dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. And almost everybody's got 4 stars. I think they all do. Aries, today things are going your way, which gives you a warm feeling in your tummy. In fact, you might be privately pleased about something that very few know about. Tonight, enjoy privacy. Taurus, this is a wonderful day, a popular day. Enjoy the company of friends as well as groups and organizations. You'll be keen to express your views and enlighten others with your wisdom, and tonight, warm friendships. Gemini is 5 stars. You couldn't pick a better day to make your pitch to bosses, parents, and VIPs, especially if what you ultimately want to do is boost your income or increase your assets. Tonight, your high vis. Cancer is also 5 stars. This is a wonderful choose your adventure day. It's a great day to travel. It's an excellent time to explore avenues in publishing, the media, medicine, and the law. You rule. Tonight, explore. Leo, 4 stars. Many things are favored today, especially travel, exploring new ideas, plus romance with someone who is different. Tonight, check your finances. Virgo, 4 stars. You'll easily express yourself to spouses, partners, and close friends today. You might assume a position of leadership because you are popular with everyone. Tonight, listen and cooperate. Libra, 4 stars. You can get a lot done today because you have a positive attitude about whatever you're doing. Tonight, work to get better organized. And then Scorpio's 5 stars. Accept all invitations to socialize because you will enjoy the company of others today. Sports, especially competitive sports, are highlighted. Tonight, enjoy socializing. Sagittarius, 4 stars. You might enlist the help of someone to make home improvements today because you're enthusiastic about making positive changes and you're willing to take charge. Tonight, relax at home. Capricorn, 4 stars. If you're involved in sales, marketing, teaching, acting, or writing, your words are like gold today. Tonight, discussions. Aquarius, 4 stars. There's money in them thar hills. Financial discussions will favor you today because you'll demand the advantage. Tonight, check your money. And then Pisces, finally, is 4 stars. Today, the moon is in your sign is lined up with fiery Mars and Mercury, dancing with lucky Jupiter, which is why you are empowered. Tonight, you're strong.
You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for today, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are Lori and
JJ.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Lori
and J.J. Patek and Deep. Oh, let me see, where am I? Completing the Bills Stadium by June 1st appears unlikely, and this is from Mike Petro. The Buffalo Bills in Erie County have been pushing hard to have the new stadium project substantially completed and the keys turned over to the state by June 1st, but that might be too optimistic. The state, which will become the leaseholder on the new stadium, is looking at a July 1st date for the substantial completion of the stadium and said that could even stretch to August 1st. That extra time was built into the construction schedule, so turning over the keys sometime in July is no big deal, according to Steve Rinaldi, president of the Erie County Stadium Corporation, the state entity overseeing the construction of the more than $2 billion stadium. The Bills are scheduled to wrap up with the project's construction manager, Gilbane Turner, by June 1st as part of an agreement between those two parties, but the team's agreement with the state calls for a July 1st substantial completion date, and that is around when the land transfer between the county and state will happen. That will complete the process of allowing the Bills to occupy the stadium and hold an event. The wiggle room was purposely built into the schedule so that there will be 30 additional days to allow the team to hit their deadline with the state, Rinaldi said. And if that winds up being sometime in July and not July 1st, it should not set back the process to get the stadium open for an event in the summer before the 2026 NFL season. That time during June will likely be used to wrap up many of the fire and safety inspections that will need to be completed, Rinaldi said. We're expecting sometime in July, probably no later than August 1st, for the state to take actual ownership of the campus, he said. Could be up to August 1st. Minor stadium jobs will be completed during the season, but they'll likely be punch list items, and all the big stuff will be done, said Rinaldi, who last visited the site about a week ago. The demolition of the current stadium will likely get going in spring of 2027. Everything appears to be on track for the substantial completion this summer, he said. We're getting there. The state is also working with the Bills and County on rollout of opening the new stadium, which will include a ribbon cutting and what will be likely the first big event before preseason games start in August. Even if the keys aren't turned over to the state for the Bills to occupy the stadium until sometime in July, the team could still host the return of the blue and red practice as its first big event at the stadium to tune up for the season. The 2025 practice, which is usually on Friday, brought a record 39,000 fans to the current Highmark Stadium, and this year's practice would likely be August 7th. They'll have preseason games and a red and blue practice, and all of those things are expected to occur inside the new stadium, Rinaldi said. We're working on it. Rinaldi said the stadium is approximately 90% constructed. There are still around 1,500 workers on site during weekdays and 1,000 plus on weekends, he said. They're doing much of the finished work inside the stadium's interior spaces around the building. They've also been moving equipment and furniture into the stadium. Construction crews continue to work day and night, 7 days a week at the stadium, regardless of the weather, to make sure it's done on time for the 2026 season, Pete Gwelly, head of the business operations for the Bills, said last month. Now that the Bills Stadium project is closing in on substantial completion and the state has finished paying off its commitment toward construction, the focus shifts to putting money into capital improvement and maintenance funds. The Erie County Stadium Corporation on Monday approved a budget which goes from April of 2026 to March of 2027. That includes $12.7 million for upkeep funds. The state's provided $600 million in public funds toward the construction of the stadium. In the summer, the state will make the first of 30 annual payments under the stadium's 30-year lease of the $6 million into the Capital Improvement Fund. Additionally, the state will pay $6.67 million annually into the maintenance fund starting this summer for 15 years. The Bills in Erie County will be contributing as well to help ensuring that the stadium remains in top-notch shape. The money will also go toward repairs and upgrades needed for some of the team's older facilities, office, commissary buildings, and field house that will remain across Abbott Road from the new stadium. As the construction winds down, the state's operating budget went down 9% from last year to $2.7 million. The biggest change will be the state's consultant team that's been assisting with inspections, reviews of work as their stadium winds down this year, and the state will spend $1.8 million in non-personal service, which is primarily consulting and legal fees. The state also budgeted more than $828,000 in personal services for salaries and fringe benefits for up to 4 employees.
A developer revises plans for the Ellicott project. Amherst businessman and former Cox Tire Company owner Eric Fox has revised his plans for a mixed-use project on Ellicott Street in downtown Buffalo, replacing a pair of proposed townhomes with 5 apartments in a new 3-story building. Fox, who owns a tan brick building at 433 Ellicott Street that used to house Fitz Books and Waffles, had planned a year ago to spend $2.1 million to add 3 floors on top of the building to house a pair of 3-story townhome apartments. Instead, he now plans to keep that squat building as commercial space while more than quadrupling its size by putting up a 3-story structure next to and above it using the vacant lot next door. And he is more than doubling the number of residential units. That would yield a combined new building of 8,100 square feet on 0.15 acres north of the intersection of Ellicott, Chippewa, and Genesee Streets in the Genesee Gateway Historic District. Through his ELF Enterprises International, Fox wants to combine 433 and 435 Ellicott and then renovate the 1970 square foot masonry structure with its storefront intact. Meanwhile, Fox would construct a 3-story addition of 6,125 square feet to the north of and above that building with 4 one-bedroom apartments and 1 2-story 3-bedroom unit. Dubbed Lofts at Ellicott, the building would include 2 units of 639 and 659 square feet on each of the second and third floors, plus 1 2,248 square foot apartment between those floors, with 1,260 square feet on the second floor and 988 on the third. The first floor would have a single 1,432 square foot commercial space plus a lobby. The $2 million project requires approval from the Buffalo Planning Board as well as the Preservation Board. Construction would take about 12 months. This is Fox's 3rd attempt at redeveloping the building, which was constructed back in 1922 and features a Fox Tire banner on the side. He has owned it since 1996. Fox previously won city approval for a townhome project in 2019, even getting an area variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals for a flush front garage door. But work came to a halt in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. He picked up the project again in 2024 after the Genesee Gateway Historic District was expanded to include his property. In June, he bought the vacant lot next door for $125,000 from Frank Shinse's Legacy Development.
Thank you. And now we move on to sports. The Sabres and Samuelson are set to hit the road. This is from Rachel Lindsay. Matthias Samuelsson took a measured approach to his short absence from his return to the Buffalo Sabres lineup. Samuelsson missed 1 day of practice on Friday in the Sabres' 3-2 shootout win Saturday against Toronto due to maintenance for an unspecified injury. He returned to practice with the Sabres on Monday at Lecom Harbor Center and considered the benefit of taking a breather at a time when the Sabres are preparing for a long haul. It overrode the short-term game. Something just flared up on me, and I thought it was better to manage it then and miss 1 game than making it worse, the defenseman said. Just trying to be smart. We're obviously trying to play a lot more hockey this year, so just managing the body. The Sabres began a 4-game road trip when they play at 10 p.m. Tuesday at Las Vegas. It's the first of 4 games in the next 6 days for the Sabres and 4 of 7 weeks, which they will play at least 3 games a week.
Wow.
We play so many games, especially with the condensed year this year with the Olympic break. It's a lot of games in a short amount of time, says Samuelsson, whose team has 15 games remaining between Tuesday and the end of the regular season on April 15th. Any day you can try to get some treatment or some work done, or just when you're away from the rink, make some smart decisions. It's crucial down the road. The Sabres at 41-20-6 begin Monday first in the Atlantic Division with 88 points, 4 points ahead of Tampa Bay, and second in the Eastern Conference between Carolina at 90 points and tied for fourth with Minnesota in the NHL's overall standings. They're at the time of year when preservation, conservation, and maintenance are key. With the Sabres in the thick of a chase for a playoff spot, there's a real possibility this team could be playing games in April and May for the first time since 2011. Tanner Pearson and goalie Colton Ellis also rejoined the Sabres on the ice for practice Monday at Lecom Harbor Center ahead of the team's departure to Las Vegas. Sabres coach Lindy Ruff says he's hopeful he returned to the lineup on the trip that continues Thursday at San Jose, Saturday at Los Angeles, and Sunday at Anaheim. They should all be ready to return, Ruff said. Obviously, that's a lot of numbers. The focus will just be on Las Vegas tomorrow, putting a lineup together with that. A lot of times you go game to game and things sort themselves out. Pearson missed Friday's practice and Saturday's win against Toronto due to a lower body injury he sustained last week, but the 13-year NHL veteran chose to err on the side of caution in managing an injury. The Sabres acquired Pearson, a left wing from the Winnipeg Jets, on March 6th. He participated in the morning skate ahead of his debut with the Sabres in a 2-1 loss March 12th against Washington, but didn't get his first practice in with the team until Monday ahead of this trip. It was good to get the first practice in with the guys, Pearson said. It's a better way to get to know the guys, being on the ice with them more and more and more. There's a big difference between participating in a morning skate on game day versus practicing with the team. You work more on systems, Pearson said. Morning skates is kind of about the flow. Get your legs going, get your hands going. Today you're up and down the ice as a group and working in the systems. You get probably more out of practice. Pearson began his NHL career in 2013-14 and helped the Los Angeles Kings win the Stanley Cup that year. A lot has changed in injury management in the last 12 years, both from a team and player standpoint. When you first come in, you just kind of threw an ice bag on it, maybe got a massage, and that was kind of it, Pearson said, of an injury treatment and upkeep. Nowadays, there's so much more the teams have going. You have chiro, you have acupuncture. There's just so much. By beginning his career in the Kings locker room that included stars, leaders, and veterans such as Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown, and Jeff Carter, Pearson saw how these players and their teams manage their health and bodies in seasons that stretch into April, May, and June in the playoffs. That set an example for Pearson, who has played in 775 regular season games and 59 playoff games. If you want to go far in the playoffs, one of the most healthy teams wins, right? Pearson said. It takes every man. Maybe a guy out one night and in the next night, that type of thing. You got to stay on top of things because the longer you are healthy in the playoffs, the better it is.
March Magic, a cure for madness? What college sports could use is a chance to press Control-Alt-Delete. A chance for a reset of sorts, maybe delivered through a thrilling, tear-stained college basketball smorgasbord that reminds us why all the boardroom deals and million-dollar paydays that shape this changing and sometimes tawdry industry might just be worth it. What college sports could use is something it already has: March Madness. Nothing cleanses the palate in quite the same way with some magic from a darling like Miami, Ohio, or domination by Duke can. Nothing quite brings sports, real sports, not the business of sports, back to the top of the mind like a chance for a bracket bragging rights, the prospect of a heave-ho for a buzzer beater, a developing situation resulting in an Oakland upset in Pittsburgh, or a crying Piccolo player showing the world what all this means without saying a word. Though March is when most fans and non-fans alike start paying attention, college basketball season began way back in November. While Miami's undefeated run through the regular season captured the biggest on-the-court headlines, there were, as always, plenty of off-the-court machinations, some understandable, some unseemly, some par for the course. It's been only 2 months, after all, since more than a dozen players were accused by federal prosecutors of trying to fix games in a betting scandal. A look at what you might have missed and what might constitute perfect remedy for the problems created. The Charles Bideko saga. The headline: no single story spoke better about the blurred lines created by paying college players than the tale of Charles Bideko. He was, or is, a professional basketball player, having spent 3 years in the NBA's development developmental G League before deciding he wanted to come back to college and play again at Alabama. A judge granted him clearance, and he actually played 5 games for the Tide before another judge sent Badeko back to the sideline while his challenge goes on against NCAA regulations. That's right, it's not over. As a bonus, former UCLA star Amari Bailey, who played 10 games for the NBA's Charlotte Hornets, wants back in and is exploring options, which could include a spot with the Grand Canyon University for next season. The perfect antidote. Without Badeko, the high-scoring Tide, a number 4 seed, makes a run to its second Final Four in 3 years, proving the players they're paying are faring just fine without adding a pro back into the mix. An Auburn coach tries to get a Queens player. The headline, according to Auburn, there wasn't anything against the rules about one of its assistants, Ian Borders, attending the Atlantic Sun Conference tournament to watch a game involving its eventual champion, Queens University. What was unusual was Queens coach Grant Leonard not sitting there and taking it. Instead, he said Borders crossed a line by buying a courtside seat to get ahead in recruiting one of his players. We have to police ourselves, Leonard said of the coaching profession, and this is a road I don't think we as coaches want to go down. Of course, there's no stopping good players on an underdog tournament team from being poached by bigger schools in the era of NIL and liberal transfer rules. Still, this was as good an illustration as any of how awkward the whole thing can look. And don't forget that the Big Ten asked the NCAA to stop enforcing its tampering rules, saying they're too outdated to matter anymore. The antidote? Auburn misses the tournament that already happened, and Leonard parlays Queen's first March Madness appearance into a trip to the Sweet 16 and a crusade for doing what's right in a sport that's losing its bearings. Coach behavior, the headline. UCLA coach Mick Cronin, who often refers to himself as the man who sits in legendary coach John Wooden's seat, kicked his own player, Stephen Jamerson II, out of a game against Michigan State. Jamerson fouled Carson Cooper hard at the end of a contest that had gotten out of control, and Cronin sent the forward straight to the locker room. He explained Jamerson was a good kid, but if you want to be a tough guy, you need to do it during the game for a blockout, for a rebound. Cronin later apologized to Jamerson and jokingly said, "The player asked me for $10,000 more in NIL because of that." The antidote? With half of the team in foul trouble, the lightly used Jamerson goes off for 22 points and 10 rebounds in a Sweet 16 win over Michigan State next week. Duke remains number 1 in the AP poll. Duke is the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament and is number 1 in the final AP top 25 of the regular season. The Blue Devils received 50 first-place votes from a 57-person media panel in the Associated Press's men's basketball poll that was released Monday, a day after they were named the top overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Number 2, Arizona, received 7 first-place votes, with Michigan, Florida, and Houston rounding out the top 5. The Wolverines, the betting favorite to win the national championship, did not receive a first-place vote in the poll. The final rankings will be released on April 7th, a day after the national championship game. You're listening to Reading of Today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 18 minutes after the hour.
And maximum risk. 8 years later, Beans decides it was worth going for wide receiver Moore. This is from Jay Skursky. DJ Moore was destined to become a member of the Buffalo Bills. It just took 8 years longer than otherwise might have been. Moore was a part of the 2018 NFL draft class, the same one that produced quarterback Josh Allen and linebacker Tremaine Edmunds for the Bills. Edmunds was chosen with the number 16 overall pick in the first round that year, a selection that Bills general manager Brandon Beane acquired by trading up with Baltimore. As a part of the exchange, Ravens received the number 22 overall pick in the first round. In a wide-ranging interview with the Buffalo News on Monday, discussing the start of free agency for his team, Beane revealed that the Bills had stayed put at number 22 back in 2018 and Moore would have been their pick. He ended up being chosen at number 24 by the Carolina Panthers. Honestly, it's weird. You always look at how the draft is going to fall. If we don't trade up for Tremaine, he was our pick, Beane said. It's interesting. DJ and I were even talking about it in here last week when he came in. with him and Tremaine ended up playing together with the Chicago Bears. Tremaine had a good career too, but I've always wondered. The Bills had a big hole at middle linebacker when Bean drafted Edmonds, so the move was justified. The interest in Moore made sense too. Bean had just traded up the number 7 overall selection to take Allen, so it was a priority to surround the new franchise quarterback with talent. 8 years later, that priority remains the same. That's why Bean sent his second-round pick, number 60 overall, to the Bears for Moore with a fifth-round pick at number 165 overall. He can still play. He can help us, Bean said of Moore. Him and Khalil Shakir give you 2 run-after-catch guys. I think it's something that I've always liked in an offense. Just easy offense, whether it's a screen or whether it's an underneath. But he can go in one-on-one against good corners. He's got speed to get deep. There's a variety of routes he can run. There's no doubt Moore will help the Bills at a wide receiver, a position that needed to be addressed this offseason. The acquisition cost, both in terms of draft capital and annual salary, however, has been a sticking point for some. Moore signed a 4-year contract extension with the Bears in July of 2024 that carries a maximum value of $110 million. His cap number for each of the next 4 years is $24.5 million, barring a contract restructuring. He was on where the market is, I think, an affordable deal compared to what some of these guys are getting paid, Bean said. We'll have to obviously take that into consideration with our cap and where it's at. It's not like it's a 1-year rental or something like that. The Bills were in serious competition for more services at least one other team that Bean knows of, which helps explain dropping more than 100 spots in draft position. The fact that the Bills have picked near the bottom of rounds in recent seasons is, of course, a sign that the team did well in previous years. It does hurt from a negotiating perspective, though. What I get a lot of is, your pick, it's the second, but it's at the bottom. I'm considering it a third, Bean said. It's a fair point. The second round ends with pick number 64, and the third round starts with pick number 65. But when you hear of a team giving up a second-round pick, it sounds a lot more costly than a third-rounder. So you have to say to yourself, are you okay if you don't make the move and staying, Bean said. If you don't make the move, what are your other options? Go into free agency when you don't know what the price is going to be, or who else you can trade for, or how are you going to run into the same problem? At the end of the day, if you like the player and you think you can make the contract work in your system, I believe our process here and that we'll find ways with other picks, so we have to make sure we make the most of those. I'm not sure we would find a player of DJ's caliber for second, fifth swap where we dropped into that draft. Is Moore a true number 1 receiver? That depends on how you view that somewhat ambiguous description. I would say he's definitely been right at that line of a 1 or a 1B, whatever you want to call him in his career, Bean said. Moore didn't put up the numbers of a number 1 receiver last month in Chicago. The Bears installed a new offense under a new head coach, Ben Johnson, and also used 2 top 40 picks on tight end Colson Loveland in the first round at number 10 overall, and receiver Luther Burden at number 39 in the second round. Along with a second-year receiver, Rome Onuns, who was the number 9 overall pick in 2024, the one football got spread pretty thin. Moore finished with 50 catches on 682 yards, both totals which are the lowest for a single season in his 8-year contract. Bean, however, said Moore's play speed still shows up on tape. His hands are reliable. The past 3 years with the Bears, he's been charged with 10 drops on 361 targets, a drop rate of just 2.8%. Then, of course, there's the familiarity Joe Brady has with his newest receiver. The Bills' new head coach worked with the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator in 2020 and for a part of 2021, which were 2 of Moore's most productive seasons. Brady also spoke to the news on Monday about the team's early activity this offseason, including the acquisition of Moore. DJ is extremely bright. He's great with the ball in his hands. Man, he can make plays down the field, Brady said. He just runs. He doesn't come off the field. He gives that versatility to be able to move him around. And as you guys know, probably sitting through interviews with me, I love guys who aren't just one-position players. It gives that skill set that he's different than all the other wideouts we have in the room. To me, it was kind of a no-brainer. I didn't care what the price. It was worth it. I knew what I was getting with him. I think he has an element that's going to be really good for our offense. Brady's first season with the Panthers was the year that the COVID-19 pandemic greatly impacted the NFL offseason. Coaches spent most of their time in that spring instructing players over Zoom meetings. It wasn't until training camp that Moore got to be on the field with quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, which didn't leave much time to build chemistry. Still, the receiver proved to be a good fit in Brady's offense. So when Beane presented the idea of pursuing a trade for Moore this year, Brady was all in. He sat down with his offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael, and devised a plan of how Moore will be used with the Bills. There was a clear vision for how to utilize him and an added component of what he can do to our offense with the guys we already have. Brady said, "I've been with DJ in Carolina. If there was ever an opportunity to get DJ, I'm sure I'd have brought him here once or twice."
And in auto racing, drivers find joy on Penske's playground. Arlington, Texas. Roger Penske and IndyCar found a Texas-sized playground in Jerry Jones's neighborhood for a temporary street course to bring the series back to the Dallas-Fort Worth market. Nearly 3 years after IndyCar last ran on the fast 1.5-mile oval at Texas Motor Speedway, about 30 miles away, the open-wheel series raced Sunday on a 2.73-mile, 14-turn circuit on the streets of Arlington around the home stadiums of the NFL's Dallas Cowboys and the MLB's Texas Rangers. It's iconic because we are here between the Cowboys and the Rangers real estate. To have this as our playground, you might call it, for a weekend, it's just amazing, Penske said. We don't have this kind of commitment any place that we go as we do here. The investment by the partners, along with IndyCar, it's just amazing. The Grand Prix of Arlington is the first of 3 new street races on the IndyCar schedule this season. It is also the start of a multi-year deal in North Texas that came together with the involvement of a pair of successful businessmen and showmen. Their relationship goes back to when Penske was chairman of the host committee for the Super Bowl played in Detroit in 2006. 5 years before, one in Jones's then sparkling new stadium. A powerhouse partnership. The 89-year-old Penske acquired the racing series in January of 2020, and this year marks his 60 years as a team owner, with more than 650 major race wins and 48 championships across multiple series. The 83-year-old Jones is a 3-time Super Bowl champion owner, though the most recent title came 3 decades ago, whose Cowboys play in the stadium referred to as Jerry's World because of his desire for big events there. AT&T Stadium was the site of the first championship game in the college football playoff era, and the NCAA Men's Final Four, and an NBA All-Star Game. This inaugural race comes 3 months before the first of 9 scheduled World Cup matches there, the most for any of the 16 host markets this year for the world's most watched sporting event, and while work goes on inside the stadium to prepare for the installation of a grass field. Certainly, we know what the World Cup's going to be, but it is amazing that we're going to do with IndyCar, Jones said. There's no way to that you can present any better, any classier, with any more fan-friendly presentation that's been put right out here. Racing around the stadiums. During a ribbon cutting this week for IndyCar's longest street course, Jones said he couldn't believe what he was seeing and how everything came together, from the track trimmed with the paint schemes recognizing the NFL and MLB franchises partnering with IndyCar, to the grandstands and hospitality areas throughout Arlington's entertainment district. The area is just off Interstate 30, halfway between the downtown areas of Dallas and Fort Worth, a metroplex with more than 8 million residents. This thing has been done first class, and no detail has been spared, said Jones, who also expressed his excitement for the event's future. One thing for sure, Roger Penske, they wanted first impressions to be the right one. A double-sided pit is set up on the road between AT&T Stadium and Globe Life Field, where the Rangers are about to begin their 7th season. There are a couple of curves into a horseshoe turn in the Cowboys parking lot that will lead drivers onto a 0.9-mile straight where speeds could reach 190 miles per hour, and goes between MLB's teams' current and old stadiums. Both of those basketball venues have hosted 2 World Series. I think this is the new standard. This is what IndyCar needs to stick to, 6-time series champion Scott Dixon said. The build of the track, it's all the attention to detail here. I think it's very, very impressive, driver Marcus Ericsson said. I think this really raises the standard of IndyCar racing. IndyCar has history in the DFW market. Texas Motor Speedway hosted 36 IndyCar races from the track's opening back in 1997 until Joseph Newgarden won the last race there on April 2nd, 2023, and also the previous one in 22. The series raced on that high-banked track twice a year from 1998 to 2004, including 6 season finales in a row. The 5 drivers who combined to win the last 10 IndyCar races at TMS, where laps could be more than 200 miles per hour, are racing in Arlington. I've got a lot of fond memories, obviously, said Dixon, who won 3 of those races and 5 overall on that track. It's great to be back. I love the Texas Motor Speedway. Selfishly, as a driver, I wish you could go everywhere, said 3-time TMS winner Newgarden, who also won last week in Phoenix. I would love to race there and here, but if we're not going to be there, I'm happy that we have this event. I'm certainly really pleased with what they've put on here.
I love racing. From the Associated Press, we have Sweden's Aberg takes a sour turn at TPC. Ludwig Aberg was the model of control at the Players' Championship in the lead for 36 consecutive holes and marched into what looked to be a methodical win on the TPC sawgrass of Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. And then control gave way to collapse. His 7 was sailed into the water right of the green on the par 5 11th. His driver was pulled left into the water on reachable par 4 12th. Aberg stood at the 11th tee ahead by 2. He walked to the 13th tee behind by 3. The Swede never recovered, shot 40 on the back 9, closed with a 4 under 76 and tied for 5th. Obviously, today's back 9 was not good, he said, but that's the way it goes sometimes. By the time he reached the theater surrounding the island green on the 17th hole, the tournament was being decided ahead on the 18th hole when Cameron Young blistered the longest drive ever on the 18th hole at a wind-aided 375 yards, and Matt Fitzpatrick failed to save a par. By then, the disappointment had set in for Aberg. It all turned on the 11th hole, where he was in position for an easy birdie until his 7-wood flared out to the right and the wind kept pushing it until it found the middle of the pond. Well, I felt like I had that sort of 7-wood right miss a few times this week. On number 4 especially twice, and it came up on 11 as well, Aberg said. He salvaged a bogey after his penalty drop and then reached for a driver on the 373-yard 12th. Rory McIlroy earlier drove the green to 10 feet. Aberg was tied for the lead at 12 under par at that point after Fitzpatrick in the group ahead made a tap-in birdie on number 12. Aberg's swing was quick and the ball went left into the water. He had a drop short of the final of the water 168 yards away. His third shot went over the green and he used putter back up the slope that ran some 20 feet away. 2 putts later, he had a double bogey and was reeling. Try to press a little on number 12, hitting driver, where sometimes you can play 3-wood a little short of that bunker, Aberg said. We had a sort of a game plan as driver would be an option, and today, obviously, the wind was a little bit different from what we've had. And it was a good win for it. It was a poor swing, a really poor swing, and it definitely stings a little bit. Aberg doesn't waste time when he gets over a shot, and he said sometimes he gets a little too fast when the situation gets tense. It was every bit of that Sunday. I definitely felt a little bit fast at times. I would imagine if I look at those swings on 11 and 12, they probably were quick swings, he said. Takeaway got really fast, and then the rest of it kind of spirals from there. There's something that I should have been aware of now looking back. He didn't have the only collapse. Aberg played the final group with Michael Thorbjornsen, a college rival and friend and now a neighbor in the Ponte Vedra Beach area. His meltdown came early when Thorbjornsen pitched out the thick rough left of the fourth fairway, put his wedge in the water, and then 3-putted from 10 feet for a quadruple bogey 8. Berg managed to see the bigger picture. He tied for third at Tough Bay Hill last week. He played well enough to win at Sawgrass until those 2 shots in the water. I'm playing golf to the point where I feel like I can contend in big tournaments, Aberg said. Obviously, a good finish last week and still a top 5 finish this week. Overall, I feel I'm playing really good golf, which is really nice. He saw a nice celebration when he finished. It just wasn't his. That's the way it goes sometimes, he said.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 35 minutes after the hour. Now we have just a little bit of around and about news and notes. Sinner Sabalenka earned titles. Jannik Sinner beat Daniil Medvedev in the Indian Wells final 7-6, 6-7, 6-4 on Sunday, winning 7 straight points to rally from a 4-0 deficit in the second set tiebreak and claim the title without dropping a single set. The number 2 ranked Italian beat Medvedev for the 9th time in their last 10 matches to claim his first title at the California Desert Tournament. Medvedev handed top-seeded Carlos Alcaraz his first loss of the year in the semifinals of the BNP Paribas Open. Sinner congratulated fellow Italian Kimi Antonelli, who won Formula One's Chinese Grand Prix earlier Sunday. It hasn't anything to do with tennis, but it has been a special day for Italy, Sinner said, because I'm a huge Formula One fan, and having a very, very young Italian Kimi bringing Italy back home at the top, it's amazing. World number 1 Ariana Sabalenka beat Elena Rabienka 3-6, 6-3, 7-6 for 6 in the women's final Sunday for her first Indian Wells title. League union feel progress is made. Both the WNBA and Players Union feel progress is being made toward a new collective bargaining agreement, but they both say there's still work to be done to get a deal to the finish line. In-person talks entered a 7th consecutive day Monday afternoon after the previous session ended around 3 a.m. in the morning. We're working as hard as we can to get it done as quickly as possible, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert said after the early morning negotiations finished. It's complex. There's a lot of structure elements. This is a big, big league, and we want to do everything we can for the players. So we're going to keep making progress. It's been a long week of discussions with the WNBA and union meeting face-to-face for more than 75 hours since the first in-person bargaining session on Tuesday. None of the sessions have ended before midnight. We're still working. We're still fighting. There's still some things that we have to. Issue things that we have to get through, Union Executive Director Terry Carmichael Jackson said before Monday's session. World Cup path is closing for Neymar. Neymar's troubled path to the upcoming World Cup narrowed further after his subdued performance for Santos in a 1-1 home draw against rival Corinthians in a Brazilian league match on Sunday. It was Neymar's last game before Brazil coach Carlo Ancelotti announces his squad for 2 key friendlies on Monday. Neymar is Brazil's all-time top scorer, 79 goals. Brazil's matches against France and Croatia in the United States will, in turn, be the 2 last games before Ancelotti announces his final squad in May for the World Cup, which runs from June 11th to July 19th. The 34-year-old Neymar's performance against the Corinthians came after he missed a match that the Brazil coach attended. Iran team leaves for Oman. The Iranian women's soccer team left Malaysia on Monday night for Oman, ending days of uncertainty after 5 of the 7 squad members who sparked a diplomatic furor by seeking asylum in Australia reversed their decisions and rejoined the team in Kuala Lumpur. The squad spent several hours at the airport checking in and waiting for their flight. They declined to speak to reporters. A lone player knelt several times and prayed on a mat before boarding the plane. The Asian Football Confederation General Secretary Windsor John earlier told the Associated Press the team's departure was arranged by the Iranian embassy. He said the AFC, which is supporting the Iranian team in Kuala Lumpur, was told they are flying to Oman, but that isn't their final destination. He said he wasn't aware of their full travel plans. Asked if the Confederation is satisfied that the women will be safe back in Iran, Windsor said the AFC and FIFA will check up on them regularly with the Iranian Football Federation because they are our girls as well.
And on to some advice from Asking Eric, our Eric Thomas. Dear Eric, I have a variety of orthopedic issues, some chronic and some temporary. I use a cane, a walker, or a wheelchair when I am out of the house, depending on how I feel that day or what sort of activity I'm planning to take part in. Now that I've reached a certain age, I interact with a lot of people who are getting new hips and knees. They assume that's what's going on with me, and apparently part of the recovery process is to be cheered on or commiserated with by total strangers. I want to know how soon I'll be giving up the assistive devices, which I've been using for decades and have no plans to stop using. I don't know what to say. If I show up at the cane one day, they'll say, look, you're improving. If I show up the walker the next day, they'll ask, what happened? I'm usually mumbling something about how I'm not going to get better, but I really don't want to tell them more. I don't owe anyone any explanations, but it makes me want to skip the activity. I know they mean well, but I find their constant cheerleading very frustrating, as it is a painful reminder that I'm not going to get well like they did. I just want to be accepted for who I am, as I am, assistive devices and all. Is there a better way to handle this? Should I just smile and move on when I really want to tell them to mind their own business? I don't want to be rude, but I've had enough. And it's signed, Don't Need Cheerleading. And he answers, Dear Cheerleading, if these are people you're going to see on a regular basis or repeatedly, it might be helpful to get ahead of the comments by telling them, I've noticed you make encouraging remarks about my use of assistive devices, and I appreciate your support, but the most supportive thing you could do for me is not comment at all. It will change from day to day, and that's totally normal. It isn't rude to redirect people when they comment on our bodies or abilities. Their intentions may be in the right place, but intention and impact are very different. Even if you end up having to respond in the moment, remembering that you're telling these other people how you'd like to be communicated with, you're facilitating a better relationship, and that's a gift. Dear Eric, my recently married daughter has a husband and mother-in-law who seem out to disenfranchise me, and I don't know what to do. At the wedding, the mother-in-law went around rearranging seating, even putting herself at my family table instead of around. Throughout the wedding, she filmed me with her phone. After the wedding, I was told I was caught on video complaining about the wedding and bridal couple, which I did not do. My daughter told me her husband was having difficulty with me, so I told her to have him speak to me directly. When I spoke with him, the groom said that one of his friends told him that I said the bride's sister was a pretty one, and he was upset. I suspect the mother-in-law made this up. None of the groom's father's family was at the wedding, and apparently he has no contact with them. I suspect by his mother's recent behavior that she pushed them away, and I feel she's trying to do this to me. I said to my daughter that I don't know how to deal with all this hateful behavior directed toward me, and she has not commented or responded, and I really don't know what to do about this. And it's signed, No More Chaos. And he replies, Dear No More Chaos, think of these as separate relationships that require separate strategies. With regards to the mother-in-law, polite distance may be your best option. You were brought into contact through the wedding, but that's over. It may be healthier for your daughter and for you if you try to put her out of your mind. While she may be poisoning the well with her sons, she doesn't impact your day-to-day. It's fine to respond to rumors about you by saying that isn't true, and I am not interested in engaging in rumors, so you should go back to your own source and find out why they felt the need to talk about this. With regard to your son-in-law, the relationship may take some kid gloves. As the marriage is still in its early stages, you're both learning and what kind of relationship you'd like to have. At some point down the road, it'll be helpful to have a conversation about how you'd both like to interact, but for now, it may be best to keep a healthy boundary.
And now, how to best guard yourself with tax scams that are on the rise. Robocalls, texts, and phishing emails from scammers are up this tax season compared to previous years, with artificial intelligence likely increasing fraud attempts, according to Consumer Protection Bureau of the Federal Trade Commission. Consumer advocates and government officials urge the public to stay wary, to stop and think before engaging with phone or text messages, and to remember the IRS will not contact you directly by text or by phone. Here's what you need to know. Each year, the IRS releases its so-called Dirty Dozen of tax scams that target taxpayers. At the top of the list is impersonation of the agency by email, text, and phone. The IRS reported over 600 social media impersonators during fiscal year 2025 and urges people not to click links or open any attachments from unexpected messages. The IRS also reminds taxpayers it does not leave urgent, threatening, pre-recorded messages, call to demand immediate payment, or threaten arrest. Scammers often use alarming language or QR codes to send people to fake websites where they ask the taxpayer to verify accounts or to enter personal information. Links may also install malware or malicious software, such as ransomware, which could prevent access to files and to private information. AI-enabled IRS impersonation by phone, which is robocalls and voice mimicry and spoofed caller ID, is also increasing according to the agency. As phone scams evolve, AI provides new computer-generated tactics and spoofed caller identification to look legitimate. In this vein, identity theft is one of the most common forms of fraud around tax season, according to Rosario Mendez, an attorney for the Bureau of Consumer Protection at the FTC. Mendez defines this type of theft as the misuse of one's Social Security number or other personal information, often to collect a tax refund. People usually discover this when they go to file their tax return and discover someone else has already filed, she said. For the records of the IRS, that is, it's already happened, but it's not the person. It's an identity theft. A deluge of scams. Eva Velasquez, CEO of the Identity Theft Resource Center, said the ITRC has also tracked an increase in scams and identity theft attempts over the past several years, likely aided by AI-generated messages. We're seeing an uptick in phishing emails, fake texts, and even phone calls, Velasquez said. Scammers are trying to get you to engage in any manner. Talk to them, click the link, share your personal data, or share access to your devices or your accounts. The sheer volume and level of sophistication suggests AI is being leveraged, according to Velasquez. Deluge is the best word that I can think of because it's relentless, she said. Type, don't tap. Whenever possible, according to Velasquez, the best practice when receiving any of these messages is type, don't tap. That is, rather than tapping on any link sent in any kind of message, type in the URL of the official website for the IRS, irs.gov, or whichever agency is supposedly contacting you. Go to the source. Don't click on any of those links, she said. If you didn't initiate the contact, don't engage in it. Scammers hit all ages. According to Kathy Stokes, Director of Fraud Prevention Programs for the AARP, younger people more frequently file reports stating they've been scammed, but older individuals report losing more money than younger consumers. That's because they have more money to lose, she said. If you suspect fraud or a message seems suspicious, Stokes emphasized the importance of slowing down and talking to someone. When someone receives a notification that sounds strange, scary, or urgent, if they stop to talk to a friend or a family member or someone they can trust, they can typically figure out that it's a scam. That's also going to inoculate the people you share it with from falling for the same scam, she said. Ask for help. If someone has already used your Social Security number to file a tax return before you, it's important to let the IRS know. You should also go to identitytheft.gov to report the theft, according to Mendez. That's identitytheft.gov. At the end of that reporting process, the government will give you a personal recovery plan. If a scammer has used your Social Security number to file a tax return, it's possible the same thief could use it to open bank accounts, credit cards, or file for unemployment, she said. Another worthwhile step is to monitor your credit report and freeze credit accounts so they can't be misused. Alan Butler, Executive Director of the Electronic Privacy Information Center, echoed this, encouraging victims of scams to seek identity theft monitoring going forward as well. That said, he warns people not to pay high costs for these services, which are sometimes shady themselves, but to thoroughly vet those offerings. People can be victimized not only once with the theft of their identity, but a second time because the monitoring services are trying to upsell them, he said. Police report an option. If you've been the victim of a scam and you've lost money, you may also want to file a report with the local police. Even if you get pushback from local law enforcement, you should insist on that report, she said. There may be a means of restitution for fraud victims down the road, and they would want that report as a point of proof of what happened to you.
Thank you. From Nada Hassanain. States now limiting HIV drug assistance programs. Thousands of low-income people living with HIV could be losing drug coverage as states impose limitations on HIV assistance programs amid constrained budgets, raising alarms over consistent access to life-saving medications. Many factors are putting budget constraints on state programs, including federal funding, which has remained flat for years and hasn't been adjusted for inflation, increased drug costs, and rising insurance premiums. The Ryan White HIV/AIDS Programs is a national program supporting more than 600,000 low-income people living with HIV. States receive federal grants and drug rebate money, the latter making up the bulk of state program budgets to, among other things, help pay for medications and support community groups and specific populations such as women and children. Congress has kept key drug assistance funding at $900.3 million annually since 2014. Wow. New enrollments for state programs jumped 30% from 2022 to 2024, in part because states cut out pandemic-era Medicaid assistance. As of January, at least 18 states have pulled back their Ryan White AIDS drug assistance programs, or ADAPS, in some way, according to March 2nd analysis by health research group KFF and a health report by the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, which offers consultation for states. There are roughly 1.2 million people in the United States living with HIV, and about 1 in 4 people get support from a state drug assistance program. The disproportionate number of HIV/AIDS patients are gay, bisexual, and other men who have male-to-male sexual contact, according to the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. LGBTQ+ communities have been targeted in recent years by some federal and state policies, including the rollback of civil rights, shutting down a youth mental health hotline, and restricting health care access. Florida has introduced the most dramatic restrictions on income eligibility for its HIV drug program, cutting individual eligibility for the program from 400% of the federal poverty level to 130%. That means uninsured and underinsured people up to that. That means uninsured and underinsured people have 400% up to the 400% poverty line have no longer coverage under the program. That's roughly slashing maximum annual income for it, $63,840 for an individual down to $20,748. The state says that change will prevent a $120 million shortfall. That creates an immense coverage cliff, for example, for childless adults not eligible for Medicaid, said Amber Tynan, a CEO of Big Bend Cares, a North Florida Ryan White provider. Florida is among the 10 states that haven't expanded Medicaid eligibility under the Affordable Care Act. Florida's Department of Health didn't respond to State Line's request for comment. Delaware, Kansas, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island have also reduced income eligibility for their programs, but to a lesser extent, according to KFF. Kansas, with HIV/AIDS, whose incomes are above 250% of the federal poverty level, won't be eligible for help with Obamacare insurance premiums. That change will affect about 230 people, the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors estimates. In Pennsylvania, about 1,600 people will lose HIV drug assistance as soon as the state imposes income eligibility caps at 350% of the federal poverty level. We cannot continue to provide services at certain levels when the funding to do so does not exist, Neil Rowland, Pennsylvania Department of Health press secretary, and said in a statement. He pointed to drug costs and enrollment numbers that are steadily rising while funding remains stagnant. Florida is also removing the brand drug Biktarvy, which is the only single-tablet HIV medication regimen recommended by national guidelines for those starting treatment. It is the most widely prescribed antiretroviral medication nationally. There is no generic form. The medication is highly effective at reducing a person's viral load, meaning the virus is undetectable in blood tests and untransmittable to others. 80% of Floridians with HIV who are in the state's program use Biktarvy, Tinen said. Not having the opportunity to stay on life-saving treatment is creating quite the panic and crisis in our population, he said. For decades, we've worked to turn HIV from a fatal diagnosis into a manageable chronic condition, and that progress depends on one thing: consistent access to treatment. When that stability is disrupted, it has been in Florida, it creates real risk for patients and for public health. Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Virginia, and Washington, plus the District of Columbia, are also considering limiting which drugs they cover, according to the Alliance's report. And several other states may impose other limits to their drug assistance program. Health agencies in Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, New Jersey, South Carolina, Virginia, and Washington are considering cutting funding for core medication and support services. Others are considering implementing a 6-month recertification period, restricting the eligibility, putting caps on expenditures, and changing covered medications and lowering assistance for insurance premiums.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for March 17th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m., and we rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been Lori and
JJ Patek.
Thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which